Naval history in the 20th century was filled with powerful battleships that operated all over the world and did remarkable things, from the First World War all the way through to the Gulf War in 1991. But for me, there's one battleship whose story stands above the others. A battleship that served for more than 30 years and survived some of the deadliest theatres of 2 world wars to become Britain's most highly decorated warship. This is the story of the fearsome HMS Warspite. Warspite had its origins in the naval arms race between Britain and Germany in the lead up to the First World War. Starting with the revolutionary HMS Dreadnought in 1906, the two empires had competed to launch ever larger and more powerfully armed battleships each year. By 1912, Britain had advanced from ships with 12-inch guns, meaning they fired a shell 12 inches in diameter weighing 850 pounds, to commission what were known as super dreadnoughts, armed with larger 13.5-inch guns, taking the weight of each shell up to 1,250 pounds. But even this wasn't enough for the Admiralty, which viewed maintaining an overwhelming superiority at sea as critical to Britain's survival. When news reached London that the Americans and Japanese were both building ships with larger 14-inch guns, the First Lord of the Admiralty, Winston Churchill, ripped up the planned building programme and demanded that the Royal Navy should raise the bar. The resulting design was the Queen Elizabeth class, of which Warspite was the second to be constructed. This new ship would have enormous 15-inch guns, pushing the shell weight to a whopping 1,950 pounds. 8 of these guns would produce the heaviest broadside of any battleship on Earth at the time, eclipsing even the American New York class, which had 2 more guns. And unlike the New Yorks, Warspite and the other Queen Elizabeths had oil-fired boilers and were capable of a speed of 24 knots, making them also the fastest battleships on Earth. And this epic ship can be yours to command with today's sponsor, World of Warships Legends. World of Warships Legends is a free-to-play multiplayer game for consoles that lets you sail and fight more than 400 ships from 11 different nations, with new vessels added every 5 weeks. With easy-to-learn controls, you can soon jump into battles where tactics and fort planning will be your best friend in game modes ranging from 9v9 to a chaotic melee with 4 teams of 3. You can take command of small but deadly destroyers, well-rounded cruisers, versatile aircraft carriers, and mighty battleships like HMS Warspite. To mark the anniversary of the end of World War I on November 11th, World of Warships Legends are offering a variety of authentic World War I warships for use in-game at a discounted purchase price, including Warspite, the American Dreadnought, South Carolina and Arizona, and the eccentric HMS Agincourt with its 14 12-inch guns. You'll also be able to do a special mission with either British or German ships to unlock the German battlecruiser Von der Tann, which fought in the front line at Jutland against Warspite and sank the battlecruiser Indefatigable. Use the link in the description to join 8 million players in signing up to play World of Warships Legends today. Completed in the early years of World War I, these ships were put to the test in the colossal Battle of Jutland in 1916, when the British and German fleets clashed at the height of the war. Warspite and her sister ships formed the 5th Battle Squadron, fighting in support of Vice Admiral David Beatty's battlecruiser fleet in the early stages of the battle. After the battlecruisers Indefatigable and Queen Mary exploded, Beatty turned his force north, away from the onrushing German high seas fleet. Warspite and her sisters were then exposed to heavy fire from the leading enemy divisions. Despite being heavily outnumbered, their 15-inch guns levelled the playing field. The German battlecruisers Seydlitz, Lützow and Von der Tann will all hit multiple times with serious effects. On the British side, Warspite began to suffer especially badly among the British ships, as the sheer volume of incoming fire told. Shell after shell crashed into her, inflicting carnage below decks. Things went from bad to worse when damage caused Warspite steering to jam hard to starboard, sending the battleship turning completely out of control in a circle back towards the oncoming German fleet. Warspite now came under a withering barrage from 5 enemy ships at once as its crew battled to restore control. Eventually, the engines had to be stopped to allow emergency repairs to be carried out, leaving the battleship a sitting duck. Miraculously, Warspite survived this vulnerable position and was able to slip away to the west as the battle raged on. Scarred, Warspite limped into port the next day, badly damaged but, contrary to claims made by the Germans, remarkably still very much afloat. After Jutland, Warspite spent 2 months in dock for repairs before rejoining the fleet, though steering issues would plague the ship for the remainder of its life. She served out the rest of the First World War with the Grand Fleet and was present for the surrender of the German fleet in November 1918. She and the other Queen Elizabeth survived the post-war cull of British battleship numbers, and she served in the Atlantic and Mediterranean fleets in the interwar period. As the British began to rearm in the mid-1930s, Warspite was selected to undergo a major refit and modernisation. Major upgrades included a complete remodelling of the ship's superstructure, the addition of an aircraft catapult, and an upgrade to the guns, increasing the ship's maximum range to 32,300 yards. Warspite came back into active service in the middle of 1937. The now 22-year-old battleship served in the Mediterranean fleet until October 1939, when it was recalled to Britain to join the home fleet as a replacement for HMS Royal Oak, which had been sunk by a German U-boat while at anchor at Scapa Flow. From here, Warspite began its Second World War, a war that it would fight on the front line of virtually every theatre. In April 1940, Warspite was deployed to Norway, where on April 13th it charged into the narrow waters around Narvik to attack 10 German destroyers at close range, despite the presence of 3 U-boats nearby. For several hours it put down devastating fire, sinking the destroyers Gieser and Kölner and supporting British destroyers in running the others down. All of the German ships were destroyed, wiping out fully 50% of the Kriegsmarine's entire destroyer strength in one fell swoop. Fresh from this victory, Warspite was sent to become the flagship of the Mediterranean fleet under the command of Admiral Andrew Cunningham. Warspite arrived just in time for France's collapse and the entry of Italy into the war, which completely upended the naval balance of power there in favour of the Axis. Within days, the British met the Italian fleet at the Battle of Calabria. During the course of this engagement, Warspite duelled with 2 Italian battleships by herself and managed to score a hit on Giulio Cesare at a range of 26,000 yards, what was at the time the second longest range naval gunnery hit in history. There was to be more success to come for Warspite while it was Cunningham's flagship. In November 1940, Warspite deployed as part of the fleet supporting the air attack on Taranto, which sank 1 Italian battleship and damaged 2 others. And in March 1941, Warspite led the fleet into arguably Cunningham's finest hour at the Battle of Cape Matapan. In a daring night attack, 2 Italian heavy cruisers were obliterated at point-blank range by Warspite and her sister ships Valiant and Barham over the course of just 4 minutes. 2 months later, Warspite was at the centre of the British naval effort off Crete to try and prevent German troops getting through by sea from Greece. It and other ships came under intense air bombardment by the Luftwaffe and suffered grievously. On May 21st, Warspite was struck by an armour-piercing bomb and heavily damaged. The damage was significant enough for her to be withdrawn from the Mediterranean after this and sent for repair and refit in the United States. In June, the ship sailed down the Suez Canal and then went east, across the Indian and Pacific Oceans. In mid-August, Warspite arrived at Puget Sound Naval Yard and began a refit, including the replacement of the ship's guns and the addition of radar. Most of her crew were dispatched by train to Philadelphia to crew the battleship HMS Royal Sovereign, which was just finishing her own refit and was ready to return to Britain. In November, a new crew for Warspite was dispatched, travelling by ship across the Atlantic and then by train across Canada, arriving at Puget Sound on December 7, 1941, just in time for the start of the Pacific War. A month later, on January 7th, Warspite departed the US and sailed south across the Pacific to Sydney in Australia, and then on to Ceylon to join Admiral James Somerville's Eastern Fleet in March 1942. By then, the Allied position in the East Indies had collapsed with the loss of Singapore and the sinking of the capital ships Prince of Wales and Repulse to Japanese aircraft. For the next year, Warspite and the rest of the Eastern Fleet managed to keep a toehold in the Indian Ocean, as Allied power in the Far East reached its lowest ebb. In May 1943, Warspite returned to Britain for the first time since April 1940. In an already remarkable wartime career, she had steamed more than 160,000 miles since September 1939. After a month in Britain, Warspite was then sent back to the Mediterranean, where it joined the Allied naval armada assembling for the invasion of Italy. Over the next few months, the battleship's 15-inch guns provided invaluable artillery support to troops ashore, before in September she led the Italian fleet into internment after its surrender to the Allies. A few days later, Warspite provided fire support at the Battle of Salerno, but on the afternoon of September 15th she was hit by a German bomb and crippled, needing to be towed back to Malta and then Gibraltar for repairs. The old battle wagon returned eventually to Britain in March 1944, where full repairs could be carried out. The damage was extensive, and one of the ship's turrets could not be fixed. But this didn't stop the almost 29-year-old battleship from coming south in June 1944 to join Bombardment Force D for the Normandy landings. Warspite was one of the first ships to open fire on the morning of June 6th and fired more than 300 shells over the first 24 hours. By June 12th, her gun barrels were worn out, so she was ordered to head to Rosyth to have them replaced. On the way, a mine was struck off Harwich, doing further damage and limiting the ship's speed to just 15 knots even after repairs. Now seriously maimed, Warspite still soldiered on, coming south again to offer bombardment support off Ushant on August 25th and remaining on station until November, when it fired its guns for the last time on German positions. Then, finally, almost exactly 80 years ago, Warspite was withdrawn, and would spend the remainder of the war moored just off the coast of England. After the conclusion of the Second World War, there was a strong case to preserve Warspite as a museum ship. It had become the most decorated British warship in history, winning 15 battle honours over the course of its 3-decade career and being present at a large proportion of the Royal Navy's biggest moments over that time span. But in the aftermath of a war which had devastated Britain economically, keeping Warspite around was ruled out on cost grounds, and instead the venerable old battleship was to be broken up for scrap. In April 1947, it was towed out of Portsmouth for the journey around the southwest of England and up to Scotland to be dismantled. But Warspite, a ship which had suffered serious damage 4 times and always lived to fight another day, did not go gentle into that good night. On April 23rd, she broke free of her tow lines in bad weather and grounded off Cornwall. Several attempts were made to refloat Warspite, but to no avail. For 3 years the battleship remained stuck, refusing to be carried off to its demise. Eventually they scrapped it in place, a process that took 7 years to complete. It was a characteristically defined end to what was, in my opinion, the greatest battleship ever built. If you've got another contender for that title, let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.